We are now into hour number 4 Overdrive at prisonplanet.tv and the free audio internet streams only at Infowars.com. This will, of course, be archived at prisonplanet.tv and then reposted up to the Alex Jones channel on YouTube while that channel still exists. YouTube is openly trying to shut it down as we speak and claim that criticizing Obama in any way is now considered racism, and tried to shut the channel down last month until we filed and challenged that. So we're more and more being forced to move completely to prisonplanet.tv. Okay, in other news, we've got Paul Watson joining us in a few minutes with Webster Tarpley. I want to jam in a few of your calls. They're using this whole fracas over the debt limit, because if we don't raise the debt limit, it's catastrophe. If we do raise it, it's rack and ruin, as Ron Paul has said, because they're not going to put in the reforms that fix things. They're going to continue to give everything to the foreign banks, continue to strip Social Security and everything else. While they raise taxes, it all goes to the foreign banks. And so we'll go bankrupt completely that way. And then if they don't do the debt ceiling, then there'll be a huge default. The treasuries will be killed, and it's another disaster. So it's just absolutely horrible. But there's an article out of the Huffington Post, Super Congress debt ceiling negotiations aim to create new legislative body. And they go on to say it's not in the Constitution, but that the group will be given extraordinary powers by the president and by Speaker Boehner, McConnell, and, of course, Reid. The Super Congress, composed of members of the both chambers and parties, isn't mentioned anywhere in the Constitution, but will be granted extraordinary new powers under a plan put forth by Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell and his counterpart, Majority Leader Harry Reid. Surprise, surprise, they want a power grab. And I got to say, Tarpley, we're going to come back after the break with Watson and yourself and recap this false flag in Europe and why it's important, and your evidence that, you know, of what Gladio was, and this is a continuation of that, because I want you to define it. I don't want to get in a fight with you, but I heard your show Saturday, or part of it, when I was in the car listening to local radio, and I heard you saying, let's use the 14th Amendment. Well, that was an interpretation by Ulysses S. Grant during Reconstruction. And is the president saying that this isn't even against the states? This is the president with the Congress. And you're saying, well, if they won't raise the debt ceiling, well, they're calling for cuts. So regardless if you agree with those cuts or not, under the Constitution, it is the Congress's right to control the issuance of currency, credit, and monetary policy. And so I disagree with you that the president can engage in dictatorial activity.
Well, I think you have to realize that a default by the United States is a catastrophic event. It is a worldwide economic and financial cataclysm, and that part is not made up. It is real. We are in a real world economic depression with real dangers of the most serious kind. You can see that once, if the United States were to default on payment on these Treasury bonds, this is simply the bedrock of the entire world financial system. Every place in the world depends on these, whether directly
or indirectly. But they're maneuvering us towards that by design. They're just getting us deeper in debt before they do it. We're dead already.
Well, it's possible, but I think it's a stretch to analyze these conflicts. These are real conflicts about real economic survival. And I think first of all, it's wrong to say that the default is not a cataclysmic event. It will simply devalue all the existing central bank reserves of the world that are held in dollars, which still remains the overwhelming majority. That will cause a worldwide panic. It'll bring down all of these central banks. Now, you could say, well, we don't like central banks anyway. The problem is nobody's ready with an alternative. I have an alternative, a 5-point program at the top of my website.
No, I know about your plan.
Movement around those 5 points, and we don't have it. So therefore, we're left with total chaos. I would say let's avoid the chaos. We need more time to organize.
Webster, I wish they were listening. We got to go to break. I wish they were listening to you, but the point is they're not. So now there's a lot of other news we haven't even gotten into today. That's up on Infowars.com. Bank finance drug gang plans to overthrow Mexican government next year. Well, that's been what the whole 6-year staged war's been about, according to our sources like Selig Castile. So we're going to be going over that, obviously, a lot more tomorrow. But I've spent a lot of time on this shooter. We're going to go to a few of your calls coming up here in a few minutes. I spent a lot of time on this because I saw the branding. I saw the pre-hype, just like I saw it before 9/11. You'd have to be blind. They get you ready for this. They prep it. It's all done at a 5th grade level. And they are trying to foment a clash of Western and Eastern civilization, Islam and Christendom. Regardless of what you think about those two sides, this is what's going on. This is the stated PNAC and Israeli plan. And even the Jerusalem Post admits that there is a major connection here. This guy was a very pro-Zionist guy. And so some of our media is trying to claim Nazi and things like this and calling him a neo-Nazi. There's zero evidence of that. Also, there's not a lot of evidence that he was a, quote, right-winger. You know, they're calling him a right-wing Zionist, but he was, you know, for gays and things like that. It just sounds like a cutout where they can put whatever label they want on anybody ahead of all these new wars and things they're trying to do. Who does this serve, Webster? And we're going to Paul Watson with you, joining us via video Skype. I mean, we know that the CIA was infiltrating their police a year ago. That's confirmed. We know there were drills. We know there was a second shooter with multiple witnesses saying dark hair, Nordic features, shooting people. The cops don't want to talk about that, though it's even on CNN. We've got this ledger that he obviously didn't write. We've got his Facebook being changed after he was arrested to say conservative and Christian. I mean, this really looks like a way to get the left behind the war on terror, the left behind the police state, because people aren't going along with the Muslim fear-mongering anymore, Webster.
Well, I think, again, we have to realize that his entire ideological profile is a complete fake. In other words, it's a crazy quilt of contradictory elements thrown together and probably changing, right? Changing from day to day according to the needs of demagogy, manipulation, and so forth. All of these things are designed to play on people's psychological weaknesses. Hatreds, resentments, envies, class fear, religious fear, sexual fear, God knows what else goes into this.
Get us fighting with each other so we don't fight with the establishment. What about the pro-Palestinian rally there the day before? What about the fact that in this manifesto he, you know, loves what Israel's doing? But again, we don't even know if he really wrote this.
Well, again, I would assume that he didn't, right? That some of this is lifted from the Unabomber and some of this is some little gray bureaucrat there in NATO, in Brussels, and Mons, right? M-O-N.
No, I know, but why would the establishment then
why? First of
finger
all,
Israel?
Precisely, because this is an issue with Norway. Norway is traditionally a pro-Arab country in NATO. It's an exception to the rule. It was Norway, after all, that sponsored the Oslo peace talks, right, between Rabin of the Israelis and Arafat of the Palestinians. That was in 1994. That led to the signing of the Oslo Accords on the White House lawn with Clinton and Arafat and Rabin. Now that caused, of course, a backlash in the reactionary Israeli circles, leading to the killing of Rabin. But this is the traditional policy that they have. Now, as we're heading towards the United Nations General Assembly in September, there's going to be a resolution to actually create a Palestinian state through the UN General Assembly in the same way that Israel was created by the General Assembly, not by the Security Council, back in 1948. And the Norwegians have announced that they will vote for that, and they will also recognize that government when it exists. So this obviously opens up a conflict not just with the Israelis, but also with Hillary Clinton, the State Department, and the U.S. in general, but also maybe with the NATO people and the Brussels Commission. However, I think the big thing, the thing that's new, because this what we've seen so far is traditional, although it's important. The thing that's new, that is very concrete, is that Norway had been providing 10% of the bombing effort over Libya with 6 planes, and now, as we move towards August 1st, those 6 planes will be pulled out. They're already down to 4.
And you talked about this last night. It's a political message to the ruling class. We can kill you whenever we want with patsies that'll then take the fall. Webster, I want to bring in...
It's a message, let me just add, it's a message to the Netherlands, to Italy, to Canada, to Germany, to all sorts of people. Watch out. This clique in the CIA and NATO and MI6, we want to continue bombing Libya. Don't you dare sabotage our effort.
Absolutely. Now I want to go to Paul Watson and then to calls with you riding shotgun, Webster, but finishing up at the end of the last hour, you got cut off by the break. You were saying that L.L. Lemnitzer, the Northwoods mastermind, gets basically, kicked out by Kennedy. He goes after Kennedy's killed to be the head of NATO, and it's on record in what German and Italian investigations. Their parliament has had their former intelligence chief and former president come out and admit it, that they set up these stay-behind armed networks. If the Soviets were to ever overrun Europe, that there were already secret cells with weapons to wage a Wolverine, Red Dawn, counter and insurgency operation against the invasion. Now, what they then did was every time a political party got a little uppity, left-wing, right-wing, didn't matter, communist, whatever, got too uppity and the system didn't like them, they would just blow up a school bus, blow up a train, and blame it on their political enemies. That's been confirmed. So any final comments on the parallels here to Gladio?
Well, the Gladio, of course, you can look this up in Daniele Ganzer's book, NATO's Secret Armies. I mean, there are lots of sort of mainstream academic works that go into this, at least to some extent. What happened was that the people who were recruited as the staff, the guerrilla fighters that were organized around these large deposits of weapons, explosives, and other such tools, these were largely fascists. A lot of them were old Nazis, old fascists, and so forth. And they then, with NATO intelligence backing them up, began to carry out terrorism by about the middle of the 1960s, and then increasingly in the years after that. And this then became a kind of infrastructure of NATO-sponsored terrorism. And there's never been an accounting for this. So if you look at this guy, Breivik, with his crazy syncretic ideology, this could be somebody in that tradition.
Well, he fits it 100%. He got NATO infiltrating the police the year before and the media freaking out. And I mean, if you go back here, Webster, this fits in just absolutely... precisely. Even Kurt Nimmo, the week before last, wrote an article saying, will NATO, I forget the exact headline. Let's pull it up for PrisonPlanet.tv viewers. I think it was, will NATO play the Gladio card? That was the headline. Kurt Nimmo even saw it coming.
Good. And in effect, they did. Remember, the 22nd or 23rd of June, at the opening of those the Women's World Soccer Championship. Hello?
Yes, well,
I'm sorry, we just had a thunderclap here. At the Women's World Soccer Championship, there was a German attorney by the name of Geest, G-E-E-S-T.
And she was worried about a staged terror. That was the month before.
The possibility of nuclear terrorism. So it didn't happen in Germany. Then it happened just about exactly 1 month later in Oslo. So we were all on high alert for this, and now it comes along. And to say this is the unicorn or this is authentic, I think that's just absurd.